All right, so you ready for this? Today, we're taking a deep dive into some really fascinating stuff. We've got this leaked document we're going to be looking at. It's called Immaculate Constellation Report.pdf.
Sounds intriguing.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It reads like a real-life X-Files episode, you know?
Yeah.
It claims to be the result of this internal investigation going on for years, apparently, into UAPs, of course.
Yeah.
Technologies of unknown origin, even non-human intelligence.
Wow. So, like, the real deal.
Yeah, it really seems like it. I mean, the document's central claim is that there are elements, right, within the U.S. executive branch that have been actively concealing information
Right.
about UAPs and NHI from Congress even, and of course the public too.
Well, if that's true, that's kind of a big deal.
Huge. It
Yeah.
really makes you wonder about who's really calling the shots, you know?
Yeah. No kidding. Like, what are they so afraid of?
That's the million-dollar question, right? But the report itself is packed with details that are hard to just brush aside. I mean, there's firsthand accounts from military personnel.
Yeah.
Analysis of images taken with some of our most advanced tech, you know, and even hints at international intrigue.
Okay, so it's not just like, vague stories and hearsay.
No, not at all. This thing is chock full of specific examples, dates, data points. It's like someone took all these pieces of the UAP puzzle and laid them out as best they could.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I'm actually kind of excited to dig into this.
Me too, me too.
Yeah.
So where do we even start with something like this? Well, the document kicks off with a section called Unacknowledged Special Access Program, Immaculate Constellation.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Catchy though, right? But yeah, what does it all mean? What is that?
Well, if you believe what you read here, this program was started in direct response to those 2017 8A PASAP disclosures.
You mean when the Pentagon finally came out and said, yeah, we're looking into UAPs?
Exactly. That whole thing, the Tic Tac video, remember?
Yeah.
And Luis Elizondo, blowing the whistle on that whole program. It feels like that was a real turning point, at least in terms of public awareness.
Absolutely. It feels like that's when things really started to shift.
For sure. So this document seems to suggest that Immaculate Constellation, that's what they call this program, was created to continue that work, but in a much deeper, more secretive way,
Okay, interesting. And what exactly was their mission?
So supposedly the mission was to use military assets. We're talking satellites, ships, who knows what else, to gather intel on UAPs. Oh, and something they call reproduction vehicles, ARVs for short.
Hold on. Reproduction vehicles. What in the world is that? Most people listening are probably scratching their heads right now.
Yeah, it's a bit of a jargony term for sure.
Yeah.
Essentially, they're claiming that these ARVs are craft, like vehicles, but created by studying and replicating technologies of unknown origin.
You mean like reverse engineering UAP tech?
Exactly.
That's a lot to process. Someone, somewhere, is building things based on alien technology.
That's what they seem to be implying, yeah. It's definitely a possibility.
Okay, so who is this someone? Is it a foreign government? Or are we talking something even stranger here?
Well, the document kind of dances around that question, doesn't give any definitive answers, but it does claim that Immaculate Constellation, this program, acts as a central hub for all information relating to UAPs and ARVs.
So they're basically trying to create a black box around this whole phenomena, control the flow of information. But why? I mean, what are they so afraid of?
That is the question, isn't it? It's definitely something we need to keep in mind as we dig deeper into this document. Speaking of digging deeper, the next section of the report gets into some of the evidence they've gathered, specifically imagery intelligence.
Imagery intelligence, huh? So we're talking photos, videos, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And they're claiming that despite how fragmented U.S. intelligence databases are, Immaculate Constellation has managed to put together a pretty significant amount of visual evidence.
Okay, so what are we talking about here? Blurry blobs.
Yeah.
Grainy footage.
Oh.
Or something more concrete.
It's a mix, but the report emphasizes that a lot of these images are actually surprisingly high quality, captured with all sorts of different technologies. Infrared, FLIR, full motion video, even still photography.
All right, so give us some highlights. What are some of the most compelling images this report describes? Paint us a picture.
So one that really jumps out is from a CNTCOM report. It describes a formation of these metallic orbs.
Orbs, huh?
Yeah, orbs. Estimated to be between 3 and 6 meters in diameter. And get this, they were flying in this tight cuboid formation over the ocean.
A cuboid formation. What does that even look like?
So picture this. They're skimming the surface of the water, right? holding their positions relative to each other like they're the corners of this invisible cube. And then suddenly they just disperse at high speed.
Okay, that's pretty wild. A cube of glowing orbs zipping across the ocean. Like something out of a movie. What else have you got?
There's another report, this one from Indopacom. It talks about an incident with some intelligence vessels that were positioned in a very specific area of the Pacific. Apparently, a large triangular UAP appeared directly above them. We're talking huge, like over 100 meters long.
Whoa, okay. That's not small.
Not at all. It's described as slowly rotating with bright lights at each corner and this pulsing horizontal bar of light running along its underside.
It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. Did they manage to get any photos or video of this thing?
The report suggests that they did. It also mentions that, and this is interesting, that intelligence analysis indicates that these vessels were actually expecting this UAP to show up.
They were expecting it, so they knew it was coming.
Seems like it. And they even classified it as a reproduction vehicle, that whole ARV thing we were just talking about. So they were out there to collect data on it.
Wow. That raises even more questions about what they know about these ARVs, doesn't it?
It really does. Okay, so how about something a little closer to home?
Yeah, bring it on.
This one's from Northcom, and it describes a jellyfish UAP, observed crossing the U.S.-Mexico border, no less, moving against the wind.
No visible means of propulsion.
Nope, none. Witnesses described it as having this really strange, almost organic appearance, with pulsing lights and appendages that extended and retracted.
Okay, now we're getting into some seriously weird territory. Does the report try to explain why they described it that way?
Not really, it just sort of throws that detail out there, but it does note that similar jellyfish UAPs have been seen near some DoD facilities in Iraq and Afghanistan, so it's not just a one-off thing, apparently.
Man, it really does feel like an X-Files episode.
Oh,
okay, anything else stand out from the imagery section?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One more I got to tell you about. Also from Northcom, and it describes this supersonic UAP intercepting a U.S. Navy fighter jet off the coast, eastern seaboard. They called the UAP a range fowler.
A range fowler. Okay, what's that all about?
So this thing appears out of nowhere.
It just pops up.
Yeah, but it's going supersonic. Passes right over the F-22's cockpit, the pilot's cockpit, and then maneuvers in front of the jet, essentially boxes it in, and then, get this, escorts it away from its mission area.
Wait a minute. The F-22 couldn't shake this thing.
Nope. The report says the pilot couldn't even get a radar lock. And even with all the fancy maneuvers the F-22 can pull, this range fowler, whatever it was, just maintained its position with no problem.
That's incredible. To be that pilot, totally outmatched by something you can't even identify. I mean, that must have been terrifying.
You can say that again, but it begs the question, why escort the jet away? What was the point of that?
Yeah, what was it trying to do?
That's another big mystery. The report doesn't even try to speculate, but it definitely adds to the intrigue.
Absolutely. So we've got these strange shapes, capabilities that seem way beyond anything we can do, and so many unanswered questions. It's clear that these UAPs are not just your run-of-the-mill aircraft or anything, but it's hard to really understand what we're dealing with just from images, Ryder.
Totally agree. That's where the next section comes in. Section 3. This one focuses on defense human intelligence reporting.
Defense human intelligence reporting. Okay, so now we're getting into the first-hand accounts.
You got it. Straight from the people who actually saw these things.
Wow, that's got to be interesting.
It is. Raw, unfiltered reports from military personnel, often of photos, sensor data, really detailed descriptions of their encounters.
I can only imagine the variety in these reports, right? I mean, given all the different shapes we've already talked about and everything.
Oh, there is definitely a ton of variety, but the report actually does a really good job of, analyzing them, looking for patterns, trends, trying to make sense of it all.
That's pretty neat. And did they find any patterns?
They did.
Yeah.
It turns out that some shapes pop up way more often than others.
Okay, so hit me with it. What are the most common UAP shapes? The ones that keep popping up in these reports.
Okay, so the most common by far, the sphere.
Yeah.
Or the orb,
Orbs, okay. Classic.
Right. They come in different sizes, configurations, but that basic spherical shape seems to be a real constant. The next most common is the disc, or the classic flying saucer shape. Again, there are some variations. Some have domes, some are flat, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the classic flying saucer. Gotta love it. What else is there?
Then you've got oval-shaped UAPs, sometimes called tic-tacs.
Tic-tacs, like the one from the 2004 Navy encounter.
Well, the report doesn't explicitly make that connection, but the descriptions are definitely similar. Anyway, these tic-tacs They seem to have become more common after 2003.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and some of them, they're described as having protuberances or appendages.
Okay, so maybe not exactly like Tic Tacs then.
Right, right. So then there are reports of triangular UAPs, though those are a bit less common. Most of them are described as equilateral triangles, sometimes with stabilizers or lights at the corners. Then you've got a smaller number of reports about boomerang-shaped UAPs or arrowhead-shaped.
Oh, like that one from the Nimitz encounter?
Could be. They're usually described as sleek, aerodynamic.
Yeah.
And then, last but not least, you have a handful of reports describing really irregular, what they call organic UAPs.
Organic. Now that's just weird.
They're definitely the most bizarre and hard to explain. Some reports describe them as floating brains or jellyfish with these appendages that extend and retract. And some even talk about them shape-shifting, like portions of the UAP changing form or projecting these weird geometries from a central sphere or disk.
That's just mind-boggling. I'm trying to picture that and I just can't. So we've got the shapes down, but what about how they behave? Any patterns there in how they move or interact with things?
Oh, there are tons. And the report dives deep into this. It talks about the specific behaviors and characteristics associated with each shape. For example, spheres, those are often seen just hovering silently or moving erratically at speeds that blow conventional aircraft out of the water.
Go faster than anything we can build.
Right. Way faster. And sometimes they don't even have the usual signatures like heat trails or sonic booms.
Hmm.
But they have been known to mess with our electronics, like cause electromagnetic effects.
So they're stealthy, but can still disrupt our attack. Not exactly comforting. What about those other shapes? Any interesting behavior associated with those?
Well, the triangles are fascinating. They're often linked with beams of light and what are called toroidal light patterns.
Toroidal light patterns, huh?
Yeah, basically rings of light that seem to rotate or pulsate. And some reports even mention long-term psychological effects on people who've encountered these triangular UAPs. Increased anxiety, insomnia, even the feeling of being watched or having this weird shared awareness with the UAP.
Whoa, hold on. The report actually says that these UAPs can mess with people's minds. That's a whole other level of weird.
It is. And they don't offer much of an explanation, just lay out the data, leaving it up to us to interpret. But it's definitely one of the most intriguing and potentially disturbing aspects of the whole UAP phenomenon.
Absolutely agree with that. Okay, so we've got these intriguing shapes, behaviors that defy explanation, potential psychological effects. I mean, it's all pretty wild. Are there any specific examples in those first-hand accounts, anything that really stands out?
Oh, yeah, tons. But I'll give you a couple that really get to the heart of how strange these encounters can be. One comes from some personnel on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier. They're describing this large orange-red sphere coming down from really high altitude, stopping just above the ship.
Okay.
Well, the thing is, they reported that it felt like time was distorted during the encounter, and the sphere's light, which was really intense, it didn't illuminate anything around it.
What do you mean?
Like, the light wasn't behaving normally, it didn't cast shadows or anything. It's like the rules of physics just took a break.
Okay, that's just bizarre. What about the other example?
Okay, so this one involves metallic orbs, similar to the ones we were talking about earlier, remember? It's from an F-22 pilot, just on a routine air surveillance mission over the U.S. He sees this group of orbs, tries to intercept them, but then a smaller formation breaks off and heads right for his F-22 incredibly fast.
And he couldn't get a lock on them.
Nope. His targeting systems couldn't get a read, and he ends up being boxed in, basically escorted out of the area he was supposed to be patrolling.
Again, with the escorting, it makes you wonder what they're up to. What are they trying to communicate? Or are they even trying to communicate at all?
It's the question, isn't it? And there are other reports that echo this, these UAPs seemingly interacting with our military, our technology, in these deliberate and often totally inexplicable ways.
Yeah, it's a little unnerving, to say the least. Okay, so we've got these strange visual sightings, these first-hand accounts, the suggestion that at least some of these UAPs might be intelligently controlled. It's all very compelling. But where does it lead? I mean, does this report tell us anything about what's really going on behind the scenes?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The next section, Section 4, kind of takes a turn. It gets into the bureaucratic side of things, all about these internal DoD records. And what they reveal is, well, pretty troubling, to say the least.
Oh, now I'm really intrigued. What's so troubling about these records?
Well, according to the report, these records paint a picture of deliberate deception, like they've been obfuscating the truth when it comes to how the DoD communicates with Congress about UAPs.
Hold on, you're saying that they haven't been honest with Congress?
That seems to be the case, yeah. The report points to very specific examples where DoD representatives straight up denied that there were any UAP-related programs at all, even Immaculate Constellation, which, as we know, is the whole subject of this report. And they said this during classified briefings to members of Congress.
Wow. So they've been actively misleading Congress about what they know? That's huge. I mean, why would they go to such lengths to keep this stuff secret?
That, my friend, is another excellent question, and it's something we definitely need to explore as we keep going through this report. But for now, let's move on to Section 5. This one dives into some restricted historical records that shed even more light on the UAP phenomenon.
Okay, I'm ready for more. What kind of historical records are we talking about here?
So this section, it focuses on this 1978 NSA report. Got this really boring title, G00162788, typical government stuff.
Yeah, I've seen enough of those to last a lifetime,
Okay.
but I bet the content is anything but boring.
Oh, you are absolutely right about that. This report is all about Soviet research into parapsychology. They called it
Psi, like ESP and all that.
Exactly. Telepathy, psychokinesis, that kind of thing. But here's the kicker. They were specifically looking at how it might connect to UAPs.
Hold on, you're saying the Soviets were researching the paranormal in connection with UFOs? That's straight out of a Cold War spy movie.
I know, right? It's pretty wild. So they were exploring things like, could you use telepathy to communicate with a UAP? Or even control it?
So they thought maybe you could use your mind to, influence these things. That's pretty far out there.
It is. But according to this NSA report, Soviet intelligence, they actually believed that some UAPs might be controlled by these advanced forms of consciousness.
Okay, so they were taking this seriously.
Oh, yeah. They thought that if they could understand and master these psychic abilities, it could give them a real edge, strategically.
Like a psychic arms race. That's both fascinating and a little terrifying.
Totally agree. And the fact that U.S. intelligence was collecting info on all this, it tells you they weren't dismissing it.
No kidding. I mean, it does make you wonder if there's something more to these encounters,
Yeah.
something beyond our understanding of technology.
Right. Maybe there's this whole consciousness element that we're just starting to wrap our heads around.
It's a mind-bending thought. But honestly, this whole Immaculate Constellation report is full of them. Okay, so we've got visual evidence, first-hand accounts, government cover-ups, and now Cold War psychic espionage. What else is in this thing?
Well, Section 6 delves into the world of signals intelligence. SIGINT, basically intercepted communications.
So, listening in on other countries talking about UAPs.
Exactly. Now, the report doesn't get into specifics here because, sources and methods are super sensitive, but it does offer some pretty tantalizing takeaways.
All right, lay it on me. What did they find?
Well, the big one is that foreign governments are not only aware of UAPs, they see them as a major threat. National security level stuff.
A national security threat. Wow. Okay, but we already knew other countries were interested in UAPs, right?
Yeah, but it goes further than that. The report actually claims that some countries have tried to shoot them down.
Hold on. Shoot them down. Like with missiles.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
Wow, that's a whole other level of serious. Did they say which countries?
Nope, they don't name names. But they suggest that multiple countries have taken shots. And it's not just about shooting them down either. Some countries have their own little internal organizations, all dedicated to UAPs, trying to figure out the tech, the science behind it all, even how to manage public perception.
So it's not just the U.S. that's been keeping secrets.
Apparently not. It's a global thing. Everyone's trying to figure this out on their own.
It makes you wonder what they've learned. What kind of data they've gathered. If they've managed to get their hands on any debris, any technology, that could be a game changer.
No doubt about it. We're talking potential breakthroughs in propulsion, energy, materials. The possibilities are pretty mind-blowing.
Okay, so lots of intrigue, a potential global race for UAP tech. What about Section 7? What's the final piece of the puzzle?
Section 7 is a bit of a head-scratcher. It's just called sensitive sources, and the only description is, get this, from mouth to ear.
From mouth to ear. That's pretty vague. What do you make of that?
It's hard to say for sure. It could be anything from, confidential informants, rumors within the intelligence community, even just stories that haven't been officially documented.
So we end on a bit of a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Typical. But there are some concluding remarks, right?
Oh, yeah. And they're pretty powerful. The author really emphasizes the importance of disclosure. They acknowledge that there could be negative consequences, but ultimately they say the public has a right to know about non-human intelligence, its presence here on Earth.
That's a pretty bold statement. It sounds like they really believe this information needs to come out no matter what,
I think so too. And they end with this really cryptic Latin phrase, scientia ne probata, veritas perfidum,
which means,
knowledge through fire, truth through faith.
wow. Okay, that's a lot to unpack. I mean, this Immaculate Constellation report really is like opening Pandora's box. So much intrigue, so many unanswered questions. Before we get into all that, though, let's just take a step back for a second. What are the main takeaways from this document?
Well, for me, the most obvious takeaway is that UAPs are real. And we're not talking about misidentified planes or weather balloons or anything like that. The sheer variety of the reports, the sensor data, the first-hand accounts from credible witnesses, it all points to something truly extraordinary happening in our skies.
And not just in our skies.
Yeah.
Right. This report suggests it's global.
Absolutely. The fact that foreign governments are not only aware of UAPs, but have even tried to engage them militarily, that's huge. It tells us that this isn't just a U.S. issue, it's something that could impact everyone. International relations, global security, the whole nine yards.
Just imagine the geopolitical implications if one country, just one, managed to capture a UAP and figure out the technology. I mean, it would be a whole new world.
It would be a complete game changer, no doubt about it. We could see a whole new arms race, nations competing to understand and control this advanced technology, and who knows what that would lead to.
Yeah, it's a pretty sobering thought. Okay, so UAPs are real. They're potentially a global game changer. What else? What else can we take away from this report?
I think the report strongly suggests that at least some of these UAPs are not of human origin. I mean, they have capabilities that are far beyond anything we can currently comprehend. Instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic speeds without any sonic booms, appearing and disappearing at will. It just doesn't fit with our current understanding of physics and technology.
I mean, yeah, some of the stuff in this report sounds like it's straight out of science fiction. But if the evidence is real, then maybe science fiction isn't so far-fetched after all.
Maybe not. And the fact that some of these UAPs have been messing with our technology, disrupting radar, causing electromagnetic interference, that suggests a level of sophistication that's just beyond us.
Okay, so if they're not human, where are they from?
Mm.
And what do they want? I mean, those are the big questions, right? The ones everyone wants answered.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, this report doesn't give us any concrete answers, but it does offer some clues. Remember those reproduction vehicles we talked about earlier? That idea that someone, somewhere, is studying UAP technology, trying to replicate it. That's a chilling thought. I mean, somebody out there might have a better understanding of what's going on than we do.
It's almost like we're in this race, but against an unknown adversary. But a race to understand what exactly?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Are they trying to catch up to us? Or are they trying to protect themselves from something we don't even know about? The report doesn't say, but it does make it clear that somebody is taking this very seriously.
Okay, so we've got advanced technology, possible non-human intelligence, a potential global cover-up. It's all pretty intense. But there's one piece of this that I'm still struggling with. Those psychological effects that some people have reported during their encounters. What do you make of those?
Yeah, that's one of the most perplexing aspects of this whole thing. I mean, altered time perception, feelings of dread, even the sense of shared awareness with the UAP. It's just unlike anything we've ever encountered before.
It almost makes you think about some of those old myths and legends, about encounters with beings from other realms.
Yeah.
You often see those same themes, that sense of awe and terror and the uncanny.
That's an interesting connection. Maybe those myths and legends were just early attempts to explain experiences that people just couldn't understand, given what they knew back then.
Maybe we're still doing the same thing today, trying to use our current scientific understanding to make sense of something that just doesn't fit.
It's entirely possible. We try to fit these UAP encounters into our existing framework of knowledge, but what if that framework is just too limited? What if they represent something so radically different that it challenges our whole understanding of reality itself?
Okay, now we're really getting into the deep end here. But that's what this is all about, right? Exploring the unknown, even if it makes us question everything we thought we knew.
Absolutely, and this Immaculate Constellation report is a perfect example of that. It raises far more questions than it answers, but it opens our minds to a whole new realm of possibilities.
So advanced technology, maybe non-human intelligence, psychological effects, potential global cover-up.
Yeah.
What's it all mean? What's the big picture here?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? And I honestly don't think there's an easy answer. But if this report is accurate, it suggests that we're on the verge of something huge E, like a fundamental shift in our understanding of the universe and our place in it. It's like we're standing on the edge of this vast, uncharted territory, just starting to glimpse what might be out there.
It's exciting and terrifying at the same time.
It really is, and it makes you wonder, how are we going to respond to this, as a species, I mean? Will we embrace the unknown with curiosity and open minds, or will we just retreat into fear and denial?
Those are some pretty big questions, and I don't think there are any easy answers. But one thing's for sure. We need to be having this conversation. We need to talk about these things, explore the possibilities, and demand transparency from those in power.
I totally agree. This Immaculate Constellation report might just be one piece of a much larger puzzle, but it's a piece that could change everything. We need more information, more transparency, and we need to approach this with open minds and critical thinking.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We can't let fear or preconceived notions cloud our judgment here. We need to be willing to consider all the possibilities, no matter how strange or challenging they might seem.
Absolutely. And we can't let those in power keep us in the dark. The public has a right to know. We
Hmm.
need to demand answers. We need to hold our leaders accountable.
Okay, so we've talked about the evidence, the implications, the big picture, but there's one more thing I want to touch on before we wrap up. The author of this report.
Ah, yes. The mysterious individual who risked their career, maybe even their freedom, to bring this information to light.
Exactly. We don't know who they are, but it's clear they know a lot about UAPs. They have access to some seriously classified information. And they're obviously deeply concerned about what they've uncovered.
The report itself is so well written, meticulously documented. Whoever wrote this is smart, articulate, and clearly passionate about getting the truth out there.
And they seem to believe that the truth needs to come out no matter the cost.
They do, and I think that takes a lot of courage. They've taken a huge risk in releasing this information, and they deserve our thanks for bringing it to light.
It really makes you wonder what made them do it, What was the breaking point? Was it a sense of duty to the public? Or maybe fear of what might happen if this information stayed hidden?
It could be a bit of both, I suppose. Maybe they felt that the potential benefits of disclosure outweighed the risks, or maybe they just couldn't live with themselves knowing what they knew and keeping it secret.
It's also possible that they were worried about what might happen if this stuff stayed hidden, right? Remember, they talk about potential positive, any negative consequences of disclosure.
Yeah, good point. It's almost like they're saying that hiding this information could be just as dangerous as revealing it. Maybe they felt the public had a right to know, even if it came with risks.
It's a tough question, isn't it?
Eh.
Secrecy versus transparency, the benefits and risks of knowledge. It's something we've been grappling with for centuries, right?
Oh, yeah. These are themes you see in literature, philosophy, all throughout history.
And now it's not just theoretical,
Yeah.
It's real. This UAP phenomenon is forcing us to confront those questions in a very real way. It's making us question everything, the nature of knowledge, power, our place in the universe.
I totally agree. Okay, so we've covered a lot today. We've talked about this Immaculate Constellation report, the evidence, the implications, the mysteries surrounding the author. But before we go, I want to shift gears for a minute and talk to you directly, our listeners.
That's a great idea. I mean, this is a lot to process. It's important to hear your thoughts, your perspectives on this, because it's such a complex issue.
For sure. So what stands out to you about this document? What are the most intriguing parts for you, and where do you think we should be focusing our attention going forward?
As we're wrapping up this deep dive into the Immaculate Constellation report, one thing keeps sticking with me. It's not just presenting evidence, this document. It's like it's laying down a challenge.
How so?
It's like the author is saying, okay, here's everything I found. What are you going to do about it?
I see what you mean. It's not just a report. It's a call to action, to think critically, to question everything, to demand more from our leaders.
Exactly. And that leads to a big question. If other countries are aware of UAPs, like really aware, and have even tried to shoot them down, what does that tell us about their capabilities, their intentions?
Yeah. What does it tell us? It's a big question with huge implications. Imagine, a world where countries are secretly competing, not just with weapons and stuff, but
Right.
with who can understand and control this advanced technology first.
It's like a real-life X-Files episode, but with even higher stakes.
Yeah.
Because this isn't fiction.
Right. And it highlights how important transparency and cooperation are. If this is something that goes beyond borders, then maybe a global, unified approach is the only way to deal with it.
Yeah. This isn't something one country can handle on its own. We need open communication, a willingness to share what we know, and maybe even rethink those old geopolitical rivalries.
That's asking a lot, I know. But This report, whether we fully believe it or not, makes us think about the possibility that we're not alone. And if we really let that sink in, it could change everything.
It really could. It changes how we see ourselves, our place in the universe, the nature of technology.
This deep dive has been quite the journey, full of twists and turns and revelations that just make your head spin.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And even after all we've talked about, it feels like we're just scratching the surface of this whole UAP thing.
That's the thing about exploration, right? Every answer just leads to more questions. The more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know.
It's humbling,
Yeah.
for sure, but it's also exciting. It feels like we're on the verge of a whole new era of discovery, one that could totally change how we understand ourselves and our place in the cosmos.
I can't wait to see what we uncover next.
Me neither. But as we go forward, I think it's important to remember what the author said. Scientia nie probata, veritas perfidem.
Knowledge through fire, truth through faith. Powerful words.
They really are. It reminds us that seeking knowledge, especially when it challenges what we think we know, can be tough, even risky. But it's a risk we have to be willing to take if we want to find the truth.
And that truth, no matter how strange it might be, could set us free. Free from those limited ways of seeing the world. Open our minds to something much bigger than we ever imagined.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Immaculate Constellation report. It's been a fascinating journey, and we hope it's given you a lot to think about. Keep your minds open, keep asking questions, keep searching for the truth, no matter where it leads.